I'm Vicki Hogarth and welcome to Southwest Magazine. My guest today is Joel Mason, Artistic Director at Sunbury Shores Arts and Nature Center. Thank you for being here today, Joel.
Thanks for having me, Vicki.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background and when you started this new position?
Well, I started on July 1st, I think, and my background is varied. I'm an artist and an organizer and an academic. So I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm a writer, musician, kind of a showmaker, different. And then as an academic, I have a PhD from Concordia University, Montreal, in interdisciplinary fine arts and social practice, working on new funding approaches to the fine arts. So that's a little bit of where I come from. Yeah, in a nutshell, but I can go on longer if you want. Yeah.
And you're from Nebraska. What brought you to Sunbury Shores? How did that opportunity come about?
I'm from Minnesota originally, but
Okay.
I'm a dual citizen. My mother is from Ontario, and my dad's from California, and they somehow met in Minnesota. And so, yeah, and I'm out in New Brunswick kind of for the long term after many years of traveling, just for family reasons, just to be close to family. So I'm here to, be with my family out here and kind of do my work in a new locale.
Can I ask you about doing your PhD at Concordia in Montreal? Great art school. Their art department is really wonderful. Yeah. What was your thesis on, and how did it bring you into this career path?
Yeah, well, my thesis was part of another kind of specialized school called the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies in Society and Culture. So it's people that have interdisciplinary practices, but also have real interest in society and culture and in how we do our works in ways that move us forward or bring us new kinds of experiences. So my thesis was kind of about, from a lot of different angles, how do we free up more funding? How do we develop new approaches to funding? What do we need to change about what we think about what's happening in art and in community, such that we can fund it? Like, what's the action of funding? Is it something that comes just from patrons, or is it something that we kind of do together, right? You know, there's a sense of an entrepreneur, but what about an entre-donor? What is it to together give into something, right? And to invest in it, to have stakes in it. I think that I became really fascinated with what it meant to have skin in the game, this term, and what that means for something that's intangible, like art. Or people say it's intangible. Well, that's what we say, right? We contrast art with things that are more, concrete, like building things out of concrete, like buildings, right, or bridges. But of course, we know that isolation and anxiety from isolation is one of the biggest causes of depression in Canada, right? There's real clinical studies, so it's not something we don't know. So how do we build bridges that are real? They're just invisible in some way. And I think that art has a lot to do with that, because it opens up the creative mind frame. It opens up how we're already entangled in each other, how I look at something, I create something, you look at something, you create something else. What does that mean about who we are? So, Sunbury Shores is a fabulous place, that I'm getting to know in a fabulous community that I'm getting to know.
Yeah, I always assume too that people at home, I'm sure most of them do know Sunbury Shores, but how do you describe it as a center? It is special. We say the Arts and Nature Center too, which means that you're going to have more than just a gallery experience, and there are courses there, kids and adults. I went there when I think the first time I did a class at Sunbury Shores, I was maybe 6 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So
yeah.
I'd love to hear how you describe it to, say, your family back in Minnesota.
My Sunbury pitch, yeah. No, I think that I'm getting to know it, but what I'm getting to know is pretty amazing. It was started in 1964 by Dorothy Eidlitz, and then a number of years later, Mrs. Flamer's mother actually bequeathed the building that we're now in on Water Street to Sunbury Shores. So Mrs. Flamer, who runs Kingsbury Gardens up at the top of the hill. And so this incredible story, and starting as like an arts and nature center, but it wasn't nature as in kind of how we tend to see it now, like appreciation of nature. It was actually conservation. It was actually ecological action. So really, it's Sunbury Shores Art and Ecological Action Center is what was the intended thing, and this is also what we're working to build there. So it's a 2-story building. It has, first floor has like 2 galleries in it that show all kinds of art. Has an incredible back patio, looks onto the bay. In the basement, there's a ceramic studio, throwing wheels. There's a metal studio. In the top floor, above the first floor, there is a multi-use studio. You can do dance, painting, and then there's an amazing print studio. And if people come on down and see it sometime, the print studio is incredible because it has the old flywheel, big, huge wooden wheel that when it used to be a general store, you would bring up the shipments that would come in by boat from the bottom and bring up to store them in the top, and it's still there, like in all its glory. So yeah, we offer classes, exhibits, all kinds of programming, and we have a couple of different kids programs. We actually teach the fine arts requirement for the middle school and high school students for the school. We're not like an additional thing. We're like, since that was taken away from this particular school, Sunbury Shores has had 10 years now of stepping in to do that. And that's something that's funded by the Kiwanis Club, funded by a number of other donors specifically into the community who are like, we love that this is happening. We want our kids to have fine arts. We love that this is locally sourced. And so it's a really cool community operation, the class program specifically. Yeah.
I know you have a lot of expertise in bringing the digital world into art as well. Are there ways that you're looking at expanding Sunbury Shores offerings or adding a new level to it?
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways that I'm interested in doing stuff. I think it'll end up being a conversation, but I think that we've, through support from like Sheila Hugh Mackay Foundation, we've recently upgraded our whole ability to do things online, as I know a lot of groups have during COVID. So we have the ability to like broadcast online any kind of class experience. I think I'm interested in also what it means to have discussions about what art would mean if we thought about, especially because we sell art, right? Like, this is one of the things I like about Sunbury, because I come from an art world that oftentimes doesn't sell things and can sometimes be a bit precious about like selling, like, oh, if you sell it, then it's not as artful or something like that. That can be an idea. And I can understand that, and of course, money in the art world can get very weird. On the other hand, there's something that I like about St. Andrews and the place where we're at in Charlotte County and its socioeconomic position, to come in as an art center, like, yeah, we have grants, but we also sell art and we get that money to artists and we take a commission to run the building, to run the heat, So when I think about like digital infrastructure for the arts, I also think about how do we make it easier for people to buy in and support Sunbury Shores, not just as a donor, but also as like an investor, So that stuff that is, we don't have any of that laid out right now, but that's where a lot of my research comes in, right? Because I think that if people are invested, they act different, basically, yeah.
One thing I love about it, and I remember the first course I took there was a whale and art course when I was maybe 6 years old. And we learned about whales and we went out on the ocean, but we also did art about whales, and it was very impactful. But I love that continues on there. There's so many courses for adults too, and there's something about the center that, what's the Picasso quote about every child is an artist, the difficulty is staying one, but there's something that you do there that is really special, that you aren't just the patron and the artist. It involves everyone in all aspects of art.
Absolutely, and I think the number of people that are patrons, that are also take classes, that are also volunteer, they also teach classes. Like, it's kind of amazing, right? Because it comes from roots in 1964 when there was less people in St. Andrews, right? And it still is here kind of a do-it-yourself thing. That's what I mean about like we sell art because we're kind of doing it ourselves. We're taking care of business ourselves. We want an art center as a community, so we're going to make it happen. But it comes from even a more extreme point, I think, in the past, where it was like everybody kind of doing everything for their own enjoyment and from different sides. So you have this incredible community here of interdisciplinary people, basically, which I love. And the amount of times already in like, I guess how many months, like July, August, September, like it's been like 3 months and a bit since I've been working there. It's probably been about 20 different people that have come in and be like, when I was 6 years old, I had my first creative experience here, and it's shaped the rest of my life. I met a wonderful woman, just finishing up a career in like large scale ecological landscape architecture, and she had just finished working on the whole rebranding of Peggy's Cove, And she was doing the whole thing, like, you know, with her firm that she'd built, this architecture firm. And she said, I am so excited to retire, and I'm so excited to come and take classes at Sunbury, because this was the first place that I realized that I was a creative person. And I've gone on to do all this crazy stuff, you know, and now I'm ready to, what did she say? She said, now I'm ready to not know everything again. I thought that was really cool.
And you elevate all art forms. I know right now, for instance, if we went down today, there's a Teresa McKnight. It has an exhibit, but there's also an exhibit on, is it In the Loop, it's called?
Yeah.
And it's, is it hooking?
Yeah, it's rug hooking.
Okay.
Yeah, fiber art. Yeah, so we have one long gallery that can be easily split up into two. So we have Teresa McKnight, and then we have a number of other fiber artists in the front. And it's open now for a couple more weeks. People should come down, take it in. It's fabulous. The rug hooking is, I was just writing about it this morning, you know. It's fiber art's interesting because it's so quotidian, so everyday. And yet artists like Rosie Lee Tompkins, you know, who do these kind of abstract quilts, like all sorts of people doing interesting stuff with fiber art, where it takes an everyday object and puts it into a fine art frame, and it changes how you see it. So you can see on our website or on our Instagram that you know, we've got some fabulous pieces of like even like some cigarettes that are made that are like rug hooked, you know, or like
the cheese. I saw cheese.
Yeah,
in
the
the window.
big Baby Bell cheese makes me hungry every time. I was like, Mom, can I get those? And she's like, no. And then she would get them. I would taste them as a child. I love them. And then Teresa McKnight's stuff is incredible because it's all based on paintings done from night cams.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that, but the night cams, you know, very much implanted in like New Brunswick hunting culture, right? And she uses them to, you know, get interesting, what she would say is, you know, candid shots of deer, especially. But then also the way to make something from a night image into an image you can see, they blow out all the different color spectrum. So she takes that really digital image, and then she brings back the kind of the organic warmth of paint, of oil paint, and adds her own color to what would be like the blanched out light. So it becomes this really incredible visual experience. So I also wouldn't miss that.
I love living in a community where you often know a lot of the art. Teresa, once I got a message from her, this would be about a year ago, about an Instagram photo I had of deer. Exactly. So she said, can I use that as inspiration for something? Like, of course. It's really neat to have a lot of the artists that you go see be people you also know. And I want to just play on the academic side of who you are right now and ask you what you think it means to have an organization like Sunbury Shores that is accessible on so many levels in a community. What does that do in a context like St. Andrews? The role, I know for me what an important role Sunbury Shores has played in my life, but what do you think is the overall impact of have something like that in a small town like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge. I think that, and it goes back to that kind of discussion of what we might call intangibles, but we know they're not intangible, you know, like quality of life, you know, we call it like that. But it's really kind of making St. Andrews what I think has always been, all the way back to even like Van Horn and stuff like that, as I understand it, is a site of co-learning, a place where we're always curious and learning together. I think that when you take something like art and you take it down from needing to be high art defined by excluding people, instead make it high art and emerging artists, kids and adults and all disciplines, you know, not respecting too much of the boundaries, but art as impulse, which can have a very highly skilled deployment and can have a very curious, like the quality doesn't matter, the quality is in the experience. You can have both. What that does is set curiosity free, I think, in the community. And when you're curious, then you want to know what someone else thinks. Then you don't just be like, oh, well, you have this position about this hotly contested political issue. I don't want to hear any more. You know, it's rather like, I think Sunbury Shores contributes to a little bit more. I would say even more than just a little bit more, to being like, let's get a beer. Why don't you tell me a bit about why you think the way you do? Because I realize that we're not all easily put into boxes. You know, art teaches you that, I think, yeah.
One of the ways that we collaborate and support the gallery every year is Deck the Walls, which is coming up. And it is fun. It is. I buy a lot of my Christmas gifts for my family there, because you're not only supporting the gallery and the artists, but also finding something unique. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how it plays into Sunbury Shores?
Yeah, absolutely. So Deck the Walls is our yearly, like you say, kind of open exhibit, especially leading up to Christmas. So anybody can apply and to put something in, right? And the deadline is November 1st, right? And you can get the application form on our website, or you can come in and pick one up and talk to us about it if you have any questions. But you can put in 3 pieces for sale, and it can go from very established artists to more entry level, more curious to see how it does, right? And it's our largest show of the year, so there's a lot of traffic and a lot of buying, a lot of selling, and like you say, a lot of different price points, and a wonderful place to, as you said, get gifts for loved ones. Also discover emerging artists. I think if you're an emerging artist, this is a great moment to, if you're a bit nervous about being like, I'm the only thing on the wall. You know what I mean? Like, you won't be the only thing on the wall at Deck the Walls, because we're decking them. So we're truly decking it out there. So yeah, and that'll be going on for most of December, and is a real celebratory event. And on the 16th, COVID permitting, we hope to have Kelly Waterhouse, wonderful musician from Fredericton, down to do some jazz standards, to kind of Christmassy jazz standards So we'll have a few events in there as well.
I should say exactly that point on COVID, that you're coming into this position at a very strange time in the world. Obviously challenging has been for, I know that you've still managed to have exhibition openings and music shows at Sunbury Shores. Which another thing I love about it is that you have concerts there as well. But has that been, and continues obviously to be, a challenge to navigate COVID and still having these community-like experiences at the gallery?
Yeah, definitely. It's a challenge. I think that I'm personally lucky in that, like, we moved from being just a creative director with staff to being like co-director. So Angela McLean is a co-director with me. She's an operational director. I'm artistic director. And she has been doing that job for around 2 years. So she really has done an incredible job in terms of being able to keep up with the COVID stuff and to allow everything that we want to be able to do to happen, but also to give the strong message to the community that we're being responsible too. You know what I mean? And I think that she really deserves big kudos for keeping that relation with the community. And we're still doing things, but we're being safe too. So we have a show coming up on the 29th, Zachary Smith, from Chesapeake on the Eastern Shore, an incredible kind of what I call deep country folk musician, playing in the gallery, very limited seating, and there's only a few tickets left on our website, but it'll be small, but it'll be intimate. And I think that it's such a good room for music too. The acoustics are incredible. I'm a musician, like lifelong, so when I first went in there, I was like, oh, I love the acoustics in here. I just want to hear sounds all the time. Yeah.
And the Harbourfront Gallery, I mean, the view in there alone feels like one of the artworks to just look out the back window at the ocean.
Incredible. No, it's absolutely amazing, yeah.
Can I ask you a little bit about planning exhibits? One thing I do love about Sunbury, I have seen artists there from New York, from different places, but you can also often find a new maritime artist that you might discover for the first time, or maybe someone really renowned. How do you go about planning this? I know you're probably deep into 2022 at this point in terms of just finding out what your exhibitions you're going to have next year. But where do you go to decide, and do artists also maybe submit proposals? How does it work?
Yep, artists submit proposals, and then there's a number of different ways that it happens, basically, and I think that's it also connects to the digital question, because I have kind of an exciting idea that I might not do this year, but maybe next year. But so you have different options, and I think we're looking at doing a little bit of both this year. We're about 75% planned for 2022. And it's some very exciting stuff. A mix of emerging artists and professional artists, a mix of local artists and artists from far away, from Sweden, from Montreal, So we're doing some of it via jury, where we ask people in the community to act as kind of a jury to give a sense that diversity of perspectives is coming in to judge what's happening. And then we also curate. Like, one of my main jobs is curating. So it's like I also am like interested, especially from the position of like deep ecology, environmental studies, like I said, like ecological reconstruction and restoration as being part of the mandate of the center. Like, what is art for? It is to also show us how we're entangled in the world, that we're not these separate gods, because there's weird ideas in art history just as much as there's great ideas, and so in Western art history, you have a big idea of the artist as genius, as individual, as someone who has a spark of creativity inside them. You're not going to find me as being someone who is very interested in that position. I'm interested in that creativity is something that moves through the world, and that we all participated in different ways. And yeah, maybe some of us have been able to, in our circumstance, be able to grab onto a certain thread, you know, but that's not just because of who we are, that's because of the community that surrounds us. So I'm interested in exhibiting work that, I guess, encounters where we are in the ecological crisis, but doesn't stay in panic about that, but moves into like what is art as like a creative generation, something that gives us courage and power as a community to face it. So, and then the crazy idea that I have, which I think is just a great idea, which is to actually have a portion of maybe the 2023 exhibition season be something that we give over to members to vote on through a special voting mechanism called quadratic voting, which is a way you can incentivize people to share their preferences more clearly, instead of just being like one vote, I vote for that, or I'm going to pile my votes on the one thing I want, like my cousin's art or something. Quadratic voting, in a nutshell, just incentivizes me to put some there, but to also spread it around, so you get more of a sense of how people feel in a gradient, so you can make better choices. You can tell more information from that voting data. So, and that's like a digital algorithmic thing, you know, we would have like on a website, and everyone would be like, look at all the artworks, and then we could vote on them, and it would be a cool reflection of what the community found beautiful and interesting. So
yeah, I love that Sunbury Shores, you take an exhibit, and you're exactly what you said. It's not just this genius as, you know, higher above the rest of. There's one exhibit you do annually that's about, I think it's the Mental Health Association of New Brunswick, and shows from the artist's perspective how art lets you navigate mental health or deal with anxiety or depression or whatever.
Absolutely.
So always something different at Sunbury Shores, and I know that you have lived all over the world. I'd love to just, I was reading your bio before you got here. I'm going to mess up Berlin, Montreal, Philippines, Minnesota, obviously, but where have you lived, and how has that sort of informed your perspective of art?
Yeah, I mean, lived all over as like an itinerant artist and theorist and kind of a cultural producer. I think especially spending time in Southeast Asia, which I love for its kind of embrace of what I might call like the Creole, or in the Philippines they call halo halo, mix, you know, like the sense that there is no pure culture. Culture is itself not a purity, which is precisely what we get wrong so much, you know, and we should defend things like language and things like stuff that has meant stuff to us, but not on the basis of purity. Right? We get into real trouble. Instead, realizing that culture is always changing and mixing. Like the very thing of culture is it's bringing together. Even, you know, you and me meeting each other, you know, will change something in me and change something in you, you know. And if you put that on a large scale with cultures, we're always changing. So I think cultures like the Philippines they embrace that to such a deeper extent, and they work as a collectivity to such a deep extent that the artists that I've met there have influenced me just irreparably. You know, they're performance artists, visual artists. So yeah, that sense of kind of cultural creolization, I think, is always what's happening, and less of this kind of what's high culture and low culture, and more like how do we get in the movement of what's happening right now. You know, like that's what excites me about art and culture. Yeah.
And so then what draws you to a place like St. Andrews at this point in your life, and a center like Sunbury Shores? I know a lot of times people will ask me this too, if you've lived all sorts of different places, why do you choose to be here and put roots down? Well,
I mean, I think part of it is what you just said. I think it's to, as an artist, figure out what it means to put roots down, you know? And I remember my friend told me, it's like, oh, it's only after like 3 years that you start to actually be at home. And it's only really 5 years that you really are like actually now at home or something. You know, I don't know where the stat came from or whatever, but it was like, I really feel that. And I think there's like, you know, like I have a son, you know, I'm interested in still traveling and still maintaining my connections, but I want to build up a single place, you know? I want to use the skills that I have and my communities that I have around the world to build up one place, almost as an experiment, but more like a multi-year experiment, like a 20-year experiment. You know, like what could we do here in the next 20 years? I'm really fascinated by the kind of science fiction and like different timelines, like even in the show Community of different timelines. For anybody, shout out to anybody that likes the show Community. Joel McHale, another great Joel. This idea that you would look back and be like, oh, we did these things and we got someplace.
Yeah.
Or we didn't do those things and so we got someplace else. Or another direction. So I like the feeling of possibility and what you can do with roots, I think, and good relationships and good connections. Like I've already started to make some amazing partnerships with, like Jamie Steele, Periwinkle Productions, Luke McDonald, like up at Kingsbrae. Like we're starting like a circus arts residency and going to do some circus like performances next year as a collaboration, like not animal circus, like acrobatics, like beautiful,
so
elegant.
Cirque du Soleil vibe.
Cirque du Soleil vibe, yeah. That's a collaboration between Sunbury and Kingsbrae and the Sphere, this wonderful group from Sweden. And also with the Huntsman, we're going to do an artist in residency program that goes out to the Wolves Island, right? And brings together artists and scientists, to not just for artists to learn from scientists, but for scientists to learn from artists too. So I mean, these kind of larger infrastructural things are only possible if I root myself. If I want to be a part of them. I'm sure other people will do great things too, but if I want to enjoy them, then that's like a 5-10 year thing just to get it really, really healthy. And then the next 10 years is just for enjoying it. I hope.
And you picked a place that I find, you must find this already from being at Sunbury Shores, people in this community are really up to give themselves to a project, and they're open to possibility. We find that at the TV station here, just leaning on so many volunteers to make our production possible. It's amazing the ideas they bring and the willingness they have to try something new. It's exciting. It's
amazing. No, I mean, I love the feeling of investment, and that's part of, inheriting the leadership of a, almost 60-year-old organization, is that the people, it might not, we have membership, but we have we have 3 staff and we have 6 board members, but we're way bigger than that. The instructors and even more than the volunteers, but the people that have had their first creative experiences there are shareholders in it in a certain way, and their voices matter and their passions matter and their interest, like you said, like they're up for it. Yeah, and that's another cool thing is that Sunbury is coming up on 60-year anniversary, and we're just starting to plan what it means to kind of revive the story of Dorothy Eidlitz and to start telling that story because she was an amazing woman and a fabulous person, from New York that came up and started the place from summer people, but it's really, I think, through the Flamers. My story is that it comes up as like a place from summer people, but then through the Flamers bequeathing of the building, it becomes like a all year round place. So it's an interesting story of creolization in that sense, right? Of different groups coming together to make a place for everyone.
Well, I could talk to you all day. We are out of time today, but I hope you will come back soon and continue this conversation regularly.
Anytime,
Thank you.
Vicki. Thanks for having me.
My guest today has been Joel Mason, Creative Director of Sunbury Shores Arts and Nature Center in St. Andrews. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.